Don't you let the man stand up. Be proud.
So I'm John Kane, and I welcome you to Let's Talk Native on this Saturday, November 16th. While this program may not provide a path to spiritual enlightenment, we do encourage, and in some cases, start conversations. We don't do prayers or buffalo speeches. We take a tough look at history, oppression, and survival. We talk about culture, the arts, politics, and identity, and we do step on a few toes along the way sometimes. But our real goal here is to bring people together by breaking down what separates us. We will take on the false narratives and attempt to provide critical thinking to all that is being heaped upon us. And we do it all right here live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. So let's talk Native. But first, let me remind people that our audio streams at www.letstalknative.com. We stream live video of the show on our Facebook group page or pages via Facebook Live. Our shows are available as podcasts right after our broadcasts, and we take the video and we put it up on our YouTube channel, usually by the next day. And that YouTube channel is Let's Talk Native TV. And I encourage people to subscribe to our podcast and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can catch all our videos and all of our audio. I am the host of Let's Talk Native, and I am assisted in studio by Jake Proud, who is managing our video and our sound. Look, I always talk about critical thinking, and I don't spend a lot of time explaining exactly what that is, and not everything is as self-evident as what people think. I mean, there's a lot of, we are inundated with propaganda, whether it's, where to buy your next cheeseburger or your next basketball shoes or whatever. We are inundated with propaganda. There's stuff that is being marketed, but there's also stuff that is being, put to us to try to control how we view global world events, how we view local politicians, how we view everything. and of course, this involves education in from kindergarten through 12th grade and beyond. I mean, we're influenced in ways that we don't even realize how we're influenced. So one of the things I want to talk about today is, for those of you who may not be the news junkie that I am, there's a lot that's happening to indigenous people that may not be being characterized as such. And the perfect example of this is what's happening in Bolivia. Evo Morales, who has been the president of Bolivia for 14 years, the first indigenous person to rise from a colonial state, I guess you will, settler colonial state. Even more so, I mean, Hugo Chavez has indigenous roots, but he was still very much mixed, I guess, in terms of his upbringing. Evo Morales clearly represented an indigenous person who rose through the ranks to lead an entire country in South America. But, one of the things that I said in my promo for the show is, whether you're marginalized like we are, where we represent less than 1/10, of 1% or 1/10 of 1%, or in terms of land mass or income or however Native people are marginalized, or whether you live in a country where the indigenous population is the majority. We are under a constant assault by settler colonialism. Now, again, using these words, I want people to understand, I'm talking about people who are more assimilated to the European and mindset. So whether you're talking about Americans or whether you're talking about Europeans, it's all the same thing. Many would have you believe that a lot of these conflicts that are taking place in South America are strictly about political ideology, socialism, maybe even communism. You hear people talk about dictatorships and all kinds of other stuff. That's not what's going on here. What's going on here is just plain and simple race wars. The woman who now is proclaimed herself as the president of Bolivia, not unlike the guy who did the same thing, this Juan Guaido in Venezuela. But this woman, Janine Anez, and I may be screwing up her last name. Spanish isn't my language, so these people. Look, even if I don't care if they got a good tan. These people are white. I mean, these people are white. They are totally bought into to their Spanish indoctrination. This woman went so far as to say, in previous comments and even in, as she's wrestling control of a country like Bolivia, has made comments calling it indigenous people satanic, devil worshippers. And which is, this isn't just pitting Christianity against, non-Christians. This is about race. Most of the conflicts that are taking place in South America are brown people versus white people. Various shades of white people and various shades of brown people. But it's still, you can see that it has to do with ethnicity, if not race. I mean, we can play around. I don't want to play semantics over this, but it is indigenous people and the people who are really more closely aligned with indigenous people who are fighting against the wealthy elite Spanish or Brazil, Portuguese backed, whatever, European backed, and more importantly, U.S. backed political movements. I mean, the United States has been participating in a coup against Venezuela since Hugo Chavez first got elected. Claimed all kinds of things about how he was eliminating the democracy of Venezuela, even though he was getting elected with 60% of the vote, something the United States never sees. In a vote that had a higher turnout in terms of voter participation. Here, in the United States, you're lucky to see, the high 40s participate in the overall scheme of things in elections. But in South America, they had a bigger voter turnout and an overwhelming support. Now, what's been taking place in Bolivia is part of this came out of the last election where Evo Morales won again. The question that was raised was whether he won over a 50% majority or not, which would avoid a runoff. And there were some questions, and even the Organization of American States, which isn't always the most unbiased group, suggested, there were some complications that could have affected the vote tallies. And they said somewhere in the 5 to 7%. But even if you took 5 or 7%, from Evo Morales and put it to his closest challenger, it was still not even close. It was just really a question whether that 5 to 7% would have altered whether Evo Morales would have to face a runoff or not. So they cited all kinds of election fraud and with the United States' help, kept pressuring to remove Evo Morales until they finally, when the white elite, again, U.S. backed white elite, finally got the military to turn on Evo Morales, is when Evo Morales left. But I'll tell you, that story's not over, because the indigenous people and the people who supported Evo Morales and have done so for over 14 years are rising up. I don't know how this is going to end. None of this ends well. But I think it's important, and this is where I can't impress upon people enough. Don't take what the media is giving to you at face value. You've got to think this stuff through a little bit. And look, when you see this blonde-haired woman up there, referring to Native people as satanic, and you realize that she's the one who's getting backed by the United States. And being recognized, and Canada's doing the same thing. I mean, so don't make any mistakes about that. These settler colonial countries like United States and Canada, they're right with Europe on this stuff. And I'll tell you, don't think this is just a right wing in the United States and Canada either. Most of the Democrats have been openly condemning of guys like Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. And they totally backed, including the Obama administration totally backed the attempt to have Chavez removed. So, I mean, don't think that this is just a right wing. I mean, a lot of this nationalism always gets associated with, white nationalists. But there's white nationalists that are liberals or considered liberals too, or Democrats anyway. I mean, again. So when you're listening to the news and you see this stuff, because look, the United States has been trying to tell people that other forms of governance, other than their own, which they can't even consistently define what the United States is. Is it a democracy? Is it a republic? Is it a democratic republic? I mean, it depends on who you ask, I guess. But they'll insist that communism is the evil. You know, it's the devil's work, or socialism is. Monarchies, it depends on which one. You know, because or theocracies are all bad unless it's Israel. If it's Israel, then a theocracy is okay. But if it's an Islamic theocracy, then it's bad. Monarchies, I mean, there was a war that was waged between, a bunch of aristocrats colonial aristocrats against their mother country, England, and claimed that it was all about fighting the monarchy, in which now most Americans are so enamored with the idea of kings, queens, duchesses, and dukes and all that other crap that they can't even keep their head straight. I mean, I think about all the Lady Di stuff. Look, I guess if your life is all about the National Enquirer, then so be it. But you note how the United States has no problem with a dictatorship or a monarchy when it comes to some place like Saudi Arabia. I mean, again, the hypocrisy is all over the place. But again, to my point, communism. The whole Cold War. And all of the fighting the evils of China and the Soviet Union, that was all about political ideology. I mean, that's really what it was all about. Now, for some reason, Trump can have Vladimir Putin be his best buddy, and most of the people on the right who used to lead the charge during the Cold War, the whole McCarthy stuff. I mean, all of a sudden they're going to look the other way because it's Donald Trump. I saw a billboard, which was a huge billboard. It was right on like 42nd Street. Whole side, whole top of a building. And the billboard said, "Communism kills." And it gave this whole list. In fact, if I can find that picture, I'll post it up on my group page. Communism kills. They're talking about all the people killed by Stalin and, Mao and, all these people. But it ignores how many people got killed in the name of white imperialism, settler colonialism. I mean, not just speaking as a native person, a part of the extermination of the population of North America. But you can look at South America, North America, United States as they moved into the Philippines and into the South Pacific. The amount of carnage that was caused by the United States. I mean, even if you just look at in the last couple of decades, since the conflicts in the Middle East that the United States has been so heavily engaged in, since 9/11. I mean, there are some estimates that between, the trillions of dollars that have been spent, and they keep saying hundreds of thousands. And I saw one 800,000 people. That's bullshit. There have been over a million, if not millions, of people who have died as a result of the conflicts perpetrated by the United States in the areas of Afghanistan and Iraq and the like. I mean, come on, let's be honest. So this has a lot less to do with political ideologies than it does to do with race. And this isn't even about, religion. Again, the United States has no problem looking the other way on theocracies that are, again, I mentioned Israel, but they'll condemn Iran because it's a Islamic theocracy. No, this is about who the people are, and again, the racial difference. Because let's face it, Jewish people have done what many other marginalized European countries did. They managed to convert themselves to white people. So if you're white, you are going to be treated differently, regardless of whether you're a monarchy, whether you are a theocracy, whether you are a dictatorship. I mean, all of that stuff. I mean, look, even Russia now is being treated differently than they were because of Trump, I guess. So don't buy into this whole notion of these evil empires, because it has less to do with political ideology than it does to do with race. And that's what you're seeing in the Western Hemisphere, especially in South America. I mean, a lot of what these conflicts are over is simply about indigenous people. And the fact that indigenous people have had the nerve to rise up from settler colonialism to take some control of their lives. I mean, that's what That's what pissed off the United States when it came to Venezuela. Venezuela booted out the multinational oil companies, the U.S.-based and multinational oil companies. They booted them out. They said, no, you're not going to just take our oil. We're going to treat it as a national resource. We're nationalizing our commonwealth. That's what Venezuela did, and that's what Bolivia's done. It's no accident that a lot of this big turn in Bolivia took place right after Bolivia took a strong stand on the mining of lithium out of their country. I mean, that's just no accident. And why? Because the white people, the wealthy elite in these countries of South America, who owe their allegiance to the United States and owe their allegiance to their what they call their mother country, even if they're brown skinned, they still owe their allegiance to Spain. Or the Catholic Church or whatever. These guys just they just want one thing: wealth. That's what drives them. They don't give a rat's ass about democracy. Come on. And what bothers them about socialism is this whole idea about equity. Look, and so when you listen to not just Fox News, but any of the people on the right here, they'll cite, failed socialism. Socialism isn't what's failing in South America. These are race wars. This isn't capitalism versus socialism. This is wealthy elite who got their money from capitalism, who are U.S. backed, who are driving all of this, all of this conflict. Look, the economies of Venezuela didn't get destroyed by socialism. It got destroyed because you still had the wealthy elite, the whiter wealthy elite of Venezuela, who controlled too much of the wealth of the country. I mean, if half of what people said was true about Maduro or Chavez, they would have booted those people out. They'd have taken the resources. No, we're claiming these as national resources, and they didn't do that. They tried to work with a certain level of free market capitalism in their countries, but it's a free market capitalism that is done, because there's no such thing as free market. That's all bullshit. Because you still have a limited amount of people who control everything. And in any of these countries, and the United States is right there with them, where you have all of the wealth accumulated in a very, very small number of people. I mean, 1%. If 1% of your population possesses more than 50%, and oftentimes in some of these countries it's far more than that. But if only 1% of your population controls over 50% of the wealth of your country, that's not democracy, folks. Come on. That's not democracy. That's oligarchy. I mean, that is aristocracy. And it may not be, driven by blood, or royal families and that kind of stuff. No, it's driven by money. So when I say that we want to provide critical thinking, what I'm asking people to do who listen to the show or any other show, or any news program or anything else, think critically. I mean, don't buy in to the BS that's being spoon-fed to you. You got to think here. I mean, look, hear what they're saying. Look at the images. But again, understand that the images are being manipulated too. I mean, when you used to see the violence they were showing in Venezuela, it made it look like this huge outpouring of the mass population was against, Chavez, or really not against Chavez, but against Maduro. But they never showed the broad populist support that these guys, and you're seeing very little about how much the broad populace is supporting Evo Morales, even as he had to basically exile himself from the country because his life was at risk. I mean, they were going to kill him, so he fled to Mexico. But I'll tell you, there are an awful lot of people who are pushing to try to bring him back and put him back in his rightful seat of as the president of Bolivia, but not the United States. And the United States has increasingly squeezed any of these countries, just like they did with Cuba. They've squeezed all of these countries to try to ruin them economically. And it isn't just because of the power of the U.S. economy. It's the power of the people within those countries who still maintain, the major lion's share of the wealth of these countries. And where, and what do they do with their money? They have their money flowing back and forth to the United States. Look, while people were saying that the economy was collapsing in Venezuela, you could still find the wealthy elite dining in the restaurants, drinking their $6 coffees in the coffee shops and the cafes. I mean, look, that's just a matter of fact. This Thursday I will be back in New York, and I know I've got another show to do on Tuesday, but I want to tell some people now. I've got Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz, who's going to join me on my show in New York. She's a historian. She does a lot of really good research. She's not only the author of An Indigenous People's History of the United States, but All Real Indians Have Died Off and 20 Other Myths About Native People, Loaded, Disarming History of the Second Amendment, a bunch of these shows. Or books that she's written. She's going to join me in the show, and we're going to talk about this assault on Indigenous people, because this is being mischaracterized by the news, and not just Fox News, all of them. And I'll tell you, most of the politicians, Democrat or Republican, sit there in open condemnation of guys like Nicolas Maduro and Evo Morales. They always tap dance a little bit around Morales, but. Look, the United States never liked this guy, and neither party. It didn't matter if it's Obama or Trump. They did the whole idea of some native people being uppity, and he's been uppity for 14 years. So they chiseled away at his base. So we're going to talk about that on my show in New York as well. So I'm giving a little bit of a heads up for that. But I wanted to address it on my show because in my opening I talk about trying to, utilize critical thinking and recognizing false narratives. Look, nobody more than us should understand how these things get characterized. And when I talk about these assaults on indigenous people in Brazil or in Bolivia or Ecuador, in Ecuador, you have the indigenous people trying to rise up against the government. And in some of these countries, like, again, and this is the same thing that's playing out in Brazil, but in countries like Venezuela and Bolivia, you actually had indigenous people who gained some footholds in the governance. And of course, they're being pushed back partially by, with the backing of the United States. But that's not unlike what we're dealing with here. I mean, we are dealing with overt racism in the United States and Canada. In much the same way, the difference is, look, we are no threat to the United States or Canada. We're not trying to take over the countries, not yet. No, we're not trying to take over the countries, but we're trying to just have more control over our own lives. But the Seneca Nation, they're getting screwed and squeezed for another $1 billion after the state squeezed $1.5 billion out of them already. When I see our own people who know what we're facing and what we're experiencing at the hands of either the state governments or federal governments, and then we buy into the bullshit that's being spoon fed to us on television. Shame on us. We've got to think critically. We have to understand that those people who are under attack, they're like us. They've just been, honestly, but they've managed to empower themselves a little bit more. But again, the more empowerment you gain, the more you get on everybody's radar. Yeah, look, do you think the state would be trying to squeeze $1 billion out of the Seneca Nation if they didn't have success in gaming? Of course not. It's all tied directly to trying to put a foot on our neck. To make sure, let's not let them get too strong here. Seneca Nation, they're starting to develop some, pretty strong economy, and and other people are listening to them. So as the Senecas started to push back on, arguably, and maybe even not so arguably, was a pretty bad compact that they entered into the first place. They don't want anybody else doing that. So what New York's trying to do to the Seneca Nation is what Oklahoma's trying to do out there. It doesn't. No, the governor of Oklahoma claims, "Well, I'm Cherokee." Yeah, you're Cherokee. I know. Yeah, because you have a piece of paper that says so. You're not governing Cherokee. You're trying to screw them. Same with the governor in New Mexico. Look, this is what we see here. but in spite of what our experiences are against the settler colonialism in our backyards, we'll look at what's happening in South America and we'll buy into the bullshit that's being fed to us. Look, that's my warning. We have to understand that these are assaults against indigenous people. These are race wars. And there's no other way to really break it down. I mean, you can't buy into the belief that this is just about political ideologies. It's not. It's not. This is much bigger than that. This is, I mean, they don't really care. Like I said, when it's convenient to the United States, they'll support any other kind of political ideology. And they'll just pretend that they'll pretend that it's something else. Like I said, Israel, Saudi Arabia. I mean, not exactly the epitome of democracies, these places. Yeah, but Trump just had Erdogan, who just wiped out and waged a battle on the Kurds that the United States viewed as allies just a short while ago. I mean, look, these guys, they'll look the other way on tyrants, on dictators, on strong men, as long as it supports their national interest. I mean, look, the United States was bent on Venezuela because U.S. oil companies got the boots, and Evo Morales was doing much of the same thing. They were separating themselves from the World Bank, the things that the United States controls. So it's really important that people understand and try to think more critically. And when you're seeing this stuff on the news, you can't take it at face value because you're being manipulated. I mean, these are settler colonial leaders. So whether it's Juan Guaido in Venezuela or whether this Janine Inez Chavez of all names, claiming the presidency. These are white people, who are white Christians for the most part, who are more aligned with their European masters and their United States overlords, that are trying to put down any rise or any strength being gained or any foothold that indigenous people are gaining. That's just the reality. So we, as indigenous people, we who think we're so articulate and we think that we're providing so much resistance. Look, we're not doing half of what some of these other countries have done. Some of these other places have actually taken control over national policy. We sure as hell haven't done that. And what do? We find ourselves falling right in line with the bullshit propaganda that we're being fed. So don't take my word for it. All I'm saying is let's think critically as we're being fed this stuff. And remember, we have a lot more in common with Nicolas Maduro or Evo Morales than we do with these white puppets being put up by the United States. So we're kind of at the bottom of the hour, so I just really needed to stress this point. We'll talk about it a little bit more. I got a couple other things I want to talk about when we get back, and we'll take a break here and come back with we'll come back with a little bit more. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. We'll be right back.
Seems so calm to me. Loving the water, it comes so naturally. It's a gift from my mother, we can't deny. The day we lose it is the day, that's the day we die. Sense is death. It should have never been. No more sense is death. Drinking water that's unclean. It should be right. So partly wanna love for money, not for greed. What have we done? Put poison in the heart. Hey! What have we done to our children's future? This madness has gotta stop. This madness has gotta stop. Son of blood, selling our souls to the very last drop.
All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. Like I said, we're trying to promote some critical thinking here, so we'll get into a little bit more. But first, let me. I want to thank our sponsors. I want to thank Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses. I want to thank Eric White and ERW Enterprises and my good friends at Grand River Enterprises and Native Wholesale Supply. These three entities are the ones who really make this show possible, allow us to do more than just this show. I mean, their support enables me to go to New York and do a show in New York City, one of the largest media markets in the world. They allow us to slowly grow our equipment. Although we are going to be looking to do a bit of a bigger ask here. Me and Jake and I, we'd like to shoot a full-length documentary. And so we're trying to put together a little bit of an equipment list. So we may be, panhandling a little bit and trying to come up with, $2,000 or $3,000 more to purchase some recording equipment. So we can, do some of these things justice. I mean, and again, provide some of this critical thinking, give people the tools and the education so they have a better idea, what is reality and what is not just the way our history is being taught by them, folded into their American history, but what is our history? And where do some of their own words come back to bite them when we get a firmer grip on some of this stuff? So again, I thank those who sponsor us. But I'll tell you, we could always use more help because we want to do more, and there's so much more to do. And I got to tell you, sometimes I feel like not that it's a losing battle, but there's not enough of us doing this kind of thing. So the thing that as I do more, what I'm trying to get people to realize is that if they see that if maybe they see something that I produce and they don't really like it, maybe they don't like me, then I want people to be encouraged to do it themselves. We're not trying to bust open doors and nail them shut behind us. We're trying to bust open doors that other people can walk through. So I think our success is not critical to me as the people who will follow us. So, again, anybody who willing to step up to support what we're trying to do with this show, with a show in New York, and some of the short films that we do for YouTube and some of the other ones, by all means, reach out and make your offer, I guess. Hey, one of the things I want to mention, when we open the show, we usually have do a fairly long intro with music. And I know if you're impatient, if you're sitting there waiting for the screen to change because we've got the date up or, just our title shot, and you're listening to this music, one thing, try to enjoy the music. But understand that the reason we have such a long intro is because we're doing things we're setting up the show still. We have to be live to do things like share the show, get some people lined up to, do some recasting of how the show shows up on our pages and that kind of stuff. So there's a certain amount of work that we have to do after we go live, and we do that during that long intro. Now, here's the thing. When we take this video and we put it up on YouTube, we shorten it down a little bit. So we edit a little bit. So we take off a little bit of the long intro and clean up whatever we might have on the back end or whatever. But so the best viewing experience after the fact is probably not the Facebook views. By all means, do that. But is when we put it up on YouTube. When we put it up on YouTube on our Let's Talk Native TV channel, that's where it'll be trimmed down. So if you do watch these videos on Facebook and you get a little impatient, and maybe there's all the things like some of the problems with trying to watch on Facebook because of connectivity and that kind of stuff, the better viewing is on our YouTube channel. So by all means, subscribe to Let's Talk Native TV, and then you'll get the best versions of the show anyway. And of course, also the shorter videos that we do. Now, the other thing that I'll say, my show in New York is now a 2-hour show. And that could seem like a big investment of time to watch a 2-hour show or to listen to one. But, give it a shot. I mean, give it a shot, because even though, I'm the same as many people. If I see a post that's too long, I might not read it. I mean, if it looks like I don't feel like reading something for 10 minutes, then I might bypass it. So the same thing might be for a video. But give it a shot. My shows in New York are talkback shows. And these are shows that not only do I provide content in the first mainly in the first hour, or in this next week, that's where I'll have my guest on, Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. So not only will I feature my guest and the commentary, but then we go to callers. But man, don't sell our caller shorts. We have some great callers that call in New York. We get some jerks too, but that's going to happen. But even those guys, I mean, they help me sometimes articulate a point even stronger because of some of the nonsense that they may be throwing our way. So I don't mind the haters or the occasional trolls that manage to get through in New York, because I think, look, that's part of the conversation, and they have a right to question me or to try to hold me accountable, and so we do that. Again, my main message and the main thrust of what this show is about was to make people at least question themselves about how much they're buying into what they're being spoon-fed. Because, look, we've been hit with this a lot over the years. I mean, look, I'm Mohawk and I live in Seneca territory. And it's been, when I first moved out here, there was always a certain element of the population here that harbored a little ill will towards Mohawks. Especially, I'm Mohawk from Gunawaga, which, because sometimes for those people who look at the whole warrior thing as something taboo. It was, this was something that I had to establish myself in the community. And I'm not saying that everybody, thinks I'm wonderful here. I mean, I have I'm a part of a good community, and I like most of the people that I know here. And I think most people are okay with me too. Nobody's asked me to leave yet. But one of the things I got to tell you is, I was moved a little bit just today. The Seneca Nation, the Cattaraugus Community Center hosts a major basketball tournament, and they've been doing it back from even before they had the community center. And it's called the Basil Williams basketball tourney. And the home team, I saw them. They put one of the home teams, and there's usually several. But one of the home teams, and the guys who really are kind of the backbone of the Basil Williams tournament. They did a team photo, and on their photo they have on their jersey is the warrior flag, not it's kind of monochromatic, and then the Hiawatha belt below that. And I'll tell you, I was pleased to see that, because look, I know that there are some communities, and there are certainly people within a lot of these communities that have been very, very critical. I once posted I sometimes use it as a screenshot for the show when I post it up on SoundCloud or whatever, a picture of my board, my soundboard, and in the background is one of my computer monitors, and on that computer monitor is the image of the warrior flag, and I remember somebody specifically saying, "Yeah, I have a real problem with that symbol of hate and violence." And and there's so much BS. Again, I implore people to think critically. There's been so much BS talk about warriors burning longhouses or putting hits out on Oran Lions and people like that. I mean, it is such crap. And over time, even though people will massage the truth and come up with all these stories about what did or didn't happen or what is alleged to have happened, I'm thrilled to death to see that one of the more popular groups of guys on the territory are not ashamed to put and it's not just a warrior logo. This flag, the unity flag that designed by Louis Hall, wasn't intended to be a warrior flag. It was intended to be a unity flag, a symbol that could be used across native territories by native peoples as a symbol of unity and resistance. And it has been that. But it's funny, even in Standing Rock, there were folks from Onondaga who went out there, their chief lawyer chief, or whatever you want to call him, Joe Heath. He goes out there, and next thing you know, there's a controversy over whether they should have the warrior flag flying at Standing Rock. And it was a ridiculous debacle. But see, this is it. You've got a certain group of people who have tried to discredit any native, especially Mohawks, but and the Mohawk communities that have really promoted this idea of resistance and unity. And frankly, when I say resistance, I don't mean just carrying signs. I mean sometimes armed resistance. And so I was thrilled to death to see the image of that unity/warrior flag across the uniforms of one of the host teams here in Seneca Territory. Because I can tell you, a few years ago, you wouldn't have seen that. And the fact that image has grown to this level of acceptance, I mean, it doesn't mean that image has been whitewashed. I don't know. I don't think so. Maybe. It has certainly been appropriated for use of a jersey, and but I'm not troubled by that. It has become more accepted in this community. You're still going to see an awful lot more American flags flying here in Cattaraugus than you are going to see unity flags. But I gotta acknowledge real progress when I see it, and a change in attitudes and views, because there's some of the more the Handsome Lake Longhouse people here were adamantly opposed to that image. And it's funny because even on Onondaga, where they've tried to quell all of the warrior stuff, you're still going to see this symbol on somebody's on a sticker on the side of somebody's lacrosse helmet, even when they're playing for the Iroquois Nationals, or playing for one of the Onondaga teams. And so you're going to see it. They haven't been able to snuff that out. And so the idea that this image and the flag's image is, has reached a level of acceptance here in Cattaraugus and here in Seneca Nation. Look, I know the people who've always had, been, accepting of it, but I also know there's been a lot of propaganda put out to try to condemn anybody who would dare demonstrate, a warrior logo on a shirt or a hat, or, on a sports jersey. So, I wanted to mention that because, seeing the image and seeing the team posted up, team picture posted up on Facebook, I said, hey, look at that. That's kind of a change. That's something that's taken a while to get here. But, I think we got to look at look whether that image becomes acceptable or not isn't a huge, development, but it shows something. And, and as we see more and more people thinking about things like that are more based on our identity, so less American flags, more Hiawatha flags, less, honor Indian treaty flags and more unity flags. I mean, that kind of stuff. I mean, the idea that we're doing more with agriculture and thinking differently about what sustainability should be. I mean, I think that's all a positive thing. So I wanted to make that acknowledgement, even in the midst of talking about some of this other stuff. I think it's I think it's important. Let me see what else I got here. Again, when we talk about what's happening in national politics, whether it's the Canadian side or the U.S. side, I know it is real easy to get sucked into their conversations, into their right versus left, into their their election day, their referendum, their their vote this, vote that. I always come back to the same place. We have to really consider our identity and promote ourselves, and not fall into this idea that, well, if we embrace the right party in the U.S. or Canada, that somehow more is going to drop off the table to us or something. I think we've got to have a different view. We've got to talk about our autonomy and our distinction, not what more, what additional charity we can get from Big Brother. I mean, and so every time I hear somebody trying to promote this idea of us voting in their elections or backing a candidate, I mean, I know we're always going to lose some people. And I don't mean just lose them politically. When you look at a native territory and you measure success on how much money you can make, and you realize that you can make more money off our territory than living on our territories, if that's what your quality of life is geared towards, then we're going to lose some of our ambitious, if not greedy, but we're going to lose some. We're going to lose some of our people, and we're going to lose some of our people to their professions. And I'm less worried about losing, some of our people going to study medicine, even though I hope that even as they get into Western medicine, they don't forget who they are. But I'm less concerned about that. But when he says, "Oh, I'm going to get a law degree," and then what are you going to do? Who are you going to represent? Because if you're going to study state law and U.S. law, you are going to find yourself in a position that's what you're inadvertently or intentionally imposing that upon Native people. I mean, when I hear lawyers, and only a few have said something like this, when I hear lawyers say, look, my job is to find where those laws are being violated against you, that you are being, that state law or federal law is being improperly interpreted against Native people. That's not the same thing as understanding our own law or our own rights. Our rights are not defined by state and federal law. And if you're only studying state and federal law, that's the context for the way that you understand that stuff. And we lose people to that. We lose people that run for office. We don't hear so much of it here. I mean, we lose people because they get mired in an American style of governance, whether it's band councils or tribal councils or whatever else, elected councils. We lose a certain amount there, but we don't lose here. We don't lose a whole lot of people to county elections or to state elections or national, but other places do. So while some want to praise a Deborah Haaland for being a Native person who managed to secure a place in Congress, she doesn't represent me. She represents New Mexico and a small spot in New Mexico. And most of the people who voted for her were white. Same with Sharice David. There's another woman running in New Mexico too, and she's running as a Republican. So all those people who think, well, it's important to support Native people running for office. No, you mean Native people running as Democrats. Because what we refuse to acknowledge is that because we've gotten sucked into their political process so much, I think that probably half of, if you were to try to poll where Native people sit, right or left, Democrat or Republican, I mean, not that we're that engaged in their politics, but if you could poll that, you'd find that we're pretty split, pretty evenly split. I mean, Oklahoma is a red state. I mean, and look, that was considered Indian country. Most of the states that have the largest land masses and Native populations are redder than blue, and I don't mean red in terms of skin color. I'm talking red, politically red. They're more Republican than they are Democrat. So, and I'm not trying to praise the Democrats on this stuff. Look, we have to be careful about political ideology. And anytime we get in a situation where we're expected to choose, it's just like with the communism, socialism versus democracy and capitalism. As I'm talking about guys like Evo Morales or Hugo Chavez or Nicolas Maduro, make no mistake, I'm not promoting socialism or communism. I have problems with some of those ideologies too. I mean, I like the idea of equity and fairness and less income and wealth disparity that stuff's supposed to represent on one hand, But I also know how those terms have been, used to represent something else. So look, if there's an ism, I'm probably not supporting it. So socialism, communism, racism, capitalism, no, none of this stuff, is in my wheelhouse. I'm saying as a native people, we have to try not to allow ourselves to get sucked in to their isms, into their concepts and their ideologies. We should understand what they are, because then we can intelligently know where those lines are that we simply don't want to cross. We should understand those concepts. But we should also understand that as native people, our systems of, for lack of a better word, governance, don't fit into any of their categories. I was once asked, do you think the Guyana de Goa represented a democracy or a republic? Well, again, we're trying to take what we are, and we're trying to jam it into their round hole or the square hole. And honestly, I guess if you had to compare one or the other, we are more like a republic than we are, a democracy. And yet, we're going to hear people always saying, "Oh yeah, the Guyana de Goa, the Haudenosaunee, they represent the longest existing democracy the world has ever." Yeah, I don't know about that. I think those terms don't really fit who we are, because democracies are about not just one man, one vote. It's about majority rule. We had certain standards that the majority couldn't overrule, and that sounds more like a republic. We also, and our own people are so confused about things like when we use the word like sovereignty. We've appropriated that word, and we say, oh yeah, we're sovereign. Well, what does that mean exactly? Well, sovereignty is about power. It's not about freedom. It's not about a free and independent existence. And I've talked about this on previous shows. So when we get caught into that, then we say, well, wait a minute, when you say we are sovereign, well, who's we? I've heard some people say, well, the Chiefs Councils represent sovereignty. No, they don't. There's nothing in our system that says that. There's nothing in our history that would assert that. If anything, we would suggest that our birthright is something that we all carry with us, and that if we're going to use something like sovereignty, which again, not the most appropriate word, it's vested in us as individuals. Now, I'm not saying that individuals have the right to squander a people's sovereignty, no any more than a chief could do that. What I'm saying is that we have a right to carry ourselves. We have a right to to do certain things just by virtue of breathing air, living on the planet. The fact that creation allowed us to be gives us the right to be what we can be. And again, where's the line where a free and independent existence? What are the limits to that freedom, if you want to call it? Well, it's when you tramp on somebody else's. So when we talk about where does our freedom or our freeness end, it's when we start taking it away from somebody else. But we get caught in this thing. Look, I remember hearing people say, "Well, those greedy businessmen, they're exploiting and they're using our sovereignty like they took something from somebody else." And the idea of asserting our rights to do certain things, anytime I say, "Oh no, you don't have the right to do that. Only the chiefs can do that." Really? Says who? So this is where we've got to think a little bit. Now, I think we all have a responsibility, and this is again my friend Degarundage, Paul Delaron. We need to have a lot more conversation about responsibilities and less conversation about what our rights are, because who gives us these rights? I think there's birthright, but from the moment that we're born and we start to live as a people, as a community, as a part of a people, the whole nature of that is that we accept a certain responsibility to the other people, to the rest of our people, not just to our loved ones, not just to our children or our wives or our parents, but to the people. We have a responsibility to each other. So we both have an accountability and a responsibility. So when people say, well, you have no right to tell me what to do. Well, yes, we do. Because we all have a responsibility to hold each other accountable to how we're impacting each other, how we're impacting the planet, how we're impacting the future. We seem to have put that concept of 7 generations, in a storybook. We do have a responsibility to promote self and to promote identity, individual identity and collective identity. So when I talk about critical thinking, this is the stuff. When I hear people say, well, you don't understand our ways. If somebody ever says that and then fails to explain what they mean by it, then they either don't know themselves or they're trying to pretend that a certain knowledge they have empowers them over you. We need to support each other. And we need to, again, hold ourselves accountable to each other, hold each other accountable, and we need to accept responsibilities. And the one responsibility that I've been telling people have to employ is critical thinking. We have to look at some of what is being fed to us, whether it's our kids in school, whether it's what white politicians are telling us, or what lawyers are advising us. We have to step up to these conversations. We can say, wait, no, this isn't right. There's something wrong here. You want me to plead out? You want me to make a plea agreement? I'm telling you I didn't do anything wrong. And you want me to accept a guilty plea for something that I completely didn't do? Well, look, we have to do that for a parking ticket. You get pulled over for allegedly not coming to a complete stop at a sign. You go to a little town court and says, well, if you plead guilty to a parking ticket. So you got to plead guilty. There's no parking violations around. But this is the system. That is a screwed up system. Now, it may be pretty benign to plead out to a parking ticket to avoid a rolling stop or a speeding ticket. But when somebody starts indicting you or accusing you of something serious, and now all of a sudden you got to be scared just because of the potential, punishment for something you didn't do. So you plead something else out, or you compromise, and that's what we're facing with everything. Whether it's this battle over this $1 billion battle with the state of New York between the Seneca Nation, or another $1 billion battle over things like the Thruway, or where the lines on our territories get separated into their townships and their counties and their states. This is what we have to, again, when I talk about critical thinking, we have to stop being spoon-fed. What the lawyers, frankly, what tribal counselors who are taking their advice from lawyers are giving us. I don't care if you are, traditional or or elective system, whatever your ideology is, even within our native territories. Those people who sit on a council, elected or put up by clan mothers, however they got there, they are your servants. They are not your lords. They are not your masters. They aren't your leaders. Their responsibility, even within these constitutional elected systems, is to represent you. They are not your leaders. You don't take the direction from tribal council. They're supposed to take it from you. This is the critical thinking I'm talking about. Look, I want to thank you guys for listening. We'll be back here on Tuesday. And again, make a note that on Thursday, when I return to New York again for a 2-hour show, which is Thursdays from 3 to 5 p.m., I will have Roxanne Dunbar-Ortiz, the author of An Indigenous People's History of the United States. She will be joining me. We're going to talk. She's actually got a new version of that book out, by the way. I'll mention that in passing. She's got a young people's edition. So something that can be used at the school level. I mean, and I'm not suggesting that that it's been altered tremendously, but it's been changed enough so it would fit within like a school curriculum. And we'll talk about that. So she'll talk about the new edition of her Indigenous Peoples History of the United States, and we're going to talk about what's happening in South America. So join us in New York. Make a note of it. But again, between now and then, we'll see you back here on Tuesday. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. Yahweh.